So, at the time when I got into the Alcobev segment in India, this imagery was unthinkable. It we typically refer to as the vamps.
And if you have a dream, and even if it's contrary to what other people are telling you, you should absolutely go for it.
To be very honest, I completed my school to become a pilot.
And I was one of the first ones choosing to ride the monster, the beautiful monster I drive every day.
Everybody asked us, oh my God, you're going to be working for a company that's driven by men. It's a masculine company. It's big cranes and vessels. And are you going to be successful? And here I am 2.5 years later.
Hello and welcome everyone. We are ready with another edition of our special series, The Female Voice, at our We the Women platform, where we showcase changemakers, leaders, unusual voices from all walks of life. Today, we've picked up a very, very interesting conversation. We're looking at women who are making it big in spaces that are traditionally dominated by men or associated by men. Yes, those spaces still exist. And for women in these spaces, it continues to be an uphill battle to break barriers, to pull down walls, and to assert their role. The voices you're going to hear on this program come from very diverse voices. They come from the world of aviation, they come from the world of shipping, and they even come from the world of being the master of wine. Yes, that is how diverse the battles women fight are on a daily basis. We have global voices on this program, like I said, not just from all walks of life, but also from all parts of the world. So let's introduce the fabulous women on our program today, one by one. I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them one by one. I see on my screen at the moment, I see Aarohi. And let me tell you a little bit about Aarohi Pandit. Aarohi, in mid-May this year, at the age of 23, became the first woman in the world to cross the Atlantic Ocean solo in an LSA, thrilling family, friends, and aviation circles alike. She's created many records in her 20-something phase of her life, and we are going to hear a lot more about her story in just a moment from now. We're also joined by Shalini Natraj. Shalini Natraj is the global HR head of GSE Fleet and Strategic Brand at Maersk. Maersk has been one of our big supporters at We the Women, and it's super to have Shalini on the program. She has over 19 years of experience in human resource management across various multinational companies. And remember, now that she's in the world of shipping, which you sort of think of as this machismo-driven space, it would be quite fascinating to hear from her on what that world has been like and whether that world, in fact, has been anything different from the other multinationals that she's worked on. Staying with Maersk, we're also joined by Lilita Mckenzie. She's actually out there in Costa Rica, one of the first female RTG crane operators at the new APM Terminals in Port Limon in Costa Rica. And really that is challenging men right on their turf in that very hands-on role. So we'll be hearing from her in a moment from now as well. It's also my pleasure to introduce on the program, in a moment from now, we're joined by Dr. Shauna Pandya. Dr. Shauna Pandya has a fascinating story of her own. She's a physician, a speaker, a martial artist, as well as a citizen scientist astronaut candidate. And she has been part of the first crew to test a commercial spacesuit in microgravity. So this is a really, really interesting and male-dominated space. And finally, last but not the least, we're joined on the program by Sonal Holland. She's a master of wine, and she reached out to me explaining that this remains one of the spaces that continues to be dominated by men, associated with men, and is really a difficult space to actually break into. So you can see on the program that we have a very, very diverse set of speakers, very different in their own ways. So let me start with one of the youngest voices on the show. And Aarohi, I'm going to need you to unmute yourself before you respond. But tell us a little bit about your fascination with flying, how you decided to do this trip solo across the Atlantic, what were some of the barriers that you faced, and what it's been like for you thus far. But please unmute yourself before you speak. You're on mute. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a wonderful introduction. And good morning to all you ladies. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so great to see beautiful faces early in the morning. My name is Aarohi Pandit, and I fly as a professional pilot. And I actually started my training at the age of 17. So, just like every other kid, when you go into a kindergarten class and you ask them what do you want to be when you grow up, most of the answers are like pilot, doctors, and engineers. And I was one of them. So I think at the age of 8, that's when when you start thinking about what you really want to be when you grow. I'm sorry. So at the age of 8, when you finally decide, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, and my decision was to be a pilot. And after completing my 12th grade, like from high school, I went to flight school. So I was 17 when I started flying. At the age of 21, that's back in 2018, I was approached by a Navy Blue Foundation, and they were looking for young girls to take on a challenge. It was supposed to be world's first circumnavigation on a light sport aircraft carried by all women crew. And I was one of the pilot who was selected. And we went through very different kind of training. So I was a commercial pilot before I took on this expedition, but flying in ultralight. So basically, the airplane which I was given to fly, it's a purposeful Sinus, and to put it in simple words, you can call it a tuk-tuk, because I'm sure you guys are aware with the tuk-tuk, it's just a two-seat auto rickshaw, and with 80 horsepower engine, that's like a go-kart engine. And I was given a challenge to fly it around the world, which I happily took it because I am passionate about flying. I love speed and everything to do with it. So that's how I got the opportunity, and I
Lots more to ask you in the next round of questions. But what I was really struck by is that you said at 8, when you know what you want to do with the rest of your life. I mean, I don't think I knew the answer to that at 18. I don't think I know the answer to that at 49. You knew at the age of 8 that this is what you wanted to do?
I think thanks to my father, because he runs a tourism business, and because of him, I used to travel by air all the time. And there was this time I was waiting at Cochin Airport. I was taking a flight back from Cochin to Mumbai, and that was the first time ever I saw a pilot, and it also happened to be a female pilot. And I think I was obsessed by that lady. I just fell in love the way she walked, the way she carried herself, and I don't think after that to be very honest, I completed my school to become a pilot. That was my scenario, because I
So
love.
real passion project, and I want to hear a little bit about the gender barriers in that space. But let's first get Shalini in. Shalini, in terms of leading human resources at a global level, but in a company that's often thought of as masculine, you think shipping, and then the stereotype is that you think men. How did you, as a female, a sort of gendered lens, learn to look at this space differently? And did you find that you actually had to change policy, you had to change the approach to human resources, that maybe it was a very sort of testosterone dripping space that you had to actually alter? Was it different from other spaces that you've worked in?
Thanks, Barkha, and thank you for having me. And if I can take a cue from Aarohi, when I was 8, I was told I'm tall and good looking and I should be an air hostess. But here I am at 43, not an air hostess, because I decided I love psychology and people, and took up something in HR, specifically about Maersk. And I'll take you back a couple of years ago when I interviewed with Maersk. The first question everybody asked was, oh my God, you're going to be working for a company that's driven by men. It's a masculine company. It's big cranes and vessels. And are you going to be successful? And here I am 2.5 years later, pretty successful, I think, and have been able to your point, manage to say, change some policies and processes and just the way people think. And I think it's a man's job and a man's world only if you want it to be that. But I've been here a couple of years and I haven't felt that at all. And I honestly felt that as I joined them, they were a lot more open to understand what could be different. How could we make it more inclusive? What can we do to make it better for women who are coming in here? I'm not saying they've achieved everything, but I'm just saying that there is a desire in the industry. There's a desire in Maersk for it to be more inclusive. And having the role that I have, I think I have the pleasure of influencing that, Barkha, and it's been a pleasant journey. So what we have, and you can hear more as we go through this, is what I'm saying is, as I joined them, it felt masculine. After 2.5 years, I feel like I fit in, and most women who work with me also feel like they fit in. So it's been an amazing journey.
It's fascinating, but can you give me an example of what felt masculine, like one or, the fact is that even if you look at spaces which are not professions typically associated with men, many work environments can feel masculine, I know one of the top business leaders of this country was telling me that when she started out, she actually used to go to spaces where no one had even thought to have bathrooms that were comfortable for women. Like it could be something as small as that, So if you could just speak to an example of what felt masculine that is not the case today, Shalini.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you an example, and Lilita can add more. You think about the most basic of any companies is their advertisement or their posters or things that you put on a bulletin board. Every single thing would have a man or would have a vessel and would have a crane in it. And now when we go and look at any ad in Maersk, it talks about CSR, it talks about women. So what I'm saying is it's less about putting a woman and more about just the balance in everything that we say, everything that we do, bringing the softness to who we are in terms of culture. So now our ads, our promotions, and everything that we do with employment branding talks about how we are an organization that's more inclusive, that brings everybody to the forefront. And that's hundreds of examples like this where we've gone from being overly black and white to actually being a little bit more colorful and being more balanced. And I can share more examples later.
Yeah.
Does that work,
So,
Barkha?
yeah, it more than works. It runs. And you spoke about cranes, and I actually want to talk to Lilita's experience of actually being right out there at the front, being one of the foremost crane operators. And what I'm really interested in knowing is what were some of the early responses? Was there a kind of patronizing, oh, she can't do it? Did you have to really work twice as hard to prove that you in fact can? And I'm sure that all of you in different ways have actually gone through that, whether it's Aarohi flying across the Atlantic, whether it's Shalini building a different policy in a typically sort of machismo associated company. Shauna will have her own experiences, Sonal will too. But what was yours, Lilita?
Good day, everyone. Well, my experience was a big, huge change for my life. From the beginning, I always been in a different trade that are practically for men. It's not common for women. I'm also a welder. And I began working at the port, Hadeva, the public port in my country, as a welder. And it was difficult to find the room between men for a woman as a welder. Then I found out about this captation that was doing at APM Terminals, a brand new terminal port, big port was going to be building in my country, in my hometown, and I started to apply, and it was a big challenge because I was applying as a welder. But when I get there, I was surprised because they offered me a big challenge to be a crane operator. They asked if you would try to do the test. And I was scared to the beginning because I never drive, not even a bicycle the right way. So when I did the test and I was properly trained, I found out that I have the ability to operate a crane that is 25 meters from Earth and it's very high. And in the sky, I feel like, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I feel like when I'm operating between all the guys, because when I was selected, it was only 3 girls in the terminal, and I was one of the first ones chosen to ride the monster, the beautiful monster I drive every day, and it was amazing. The experience I am living is.
What's been the toughest thing? What's been the toughest thing? You call it riding the beautiful monster, and that's a fascinating story from going to be, from being a welder to a crane operator in a shipping company. What has been the toughest thing for you? Like, what were people mean? And not people, I don't mean your colleagues, but like when you tell somebody I'm a woman and I'm a crane operator, is there like bias? Are there like nasty jokes? Did you have to
No,
work really hard to prove
being
yourself?
part being part of the team of APM, I probably see that they did a great job. The guys are they're so nice. They don't make jokes. They're amazed to see women doing this kind of job. Some of them is, oh, I'm scared to climb even the ladder of my house, and you climbing up all that, climbing all the way up and operating this fascinating for they actually they always have good comments to say about you. They don't say anything wrong. At least I don't hear that in the company. And out of the company, some people will like, really, you do it? How you do you reach up there? How you do? And
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to hear more, but let's just get everybody else to also share their stories. And Shauna, if I can now come to you, you wear so many different hats, right? And that's what's really fascinating, from neuroscience to martial arts. And now you are actually looking at the final frontier, so to speak, right? And the final frontier, as you define it, is actually looking at space. Tell us a little bit about your work in this, the whole concept of being a citizen scientist, astronaut that you're aiming to be. I know you have links to Mumbai. Your grandmother, I think, still lives there. You're in Canada right now. Like I said, this is a really global set of voices from all across the world. So tell us a little bit about how you came to be this woman in science, then looking towards space, and how, of course, despite certain big names like a Kalpana Chawla, of course, whom we know in India, this continues to be a space where men do get first go. The stereotypical association is still male.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, Barkha, thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful panel, and it's an incredibly important discussion. So my origin story is very similar to Aarohi's, in that I was a kid who wanted to be an astronaut and never grew out of that dream. And when it comes to breaking down barriers, part of it is not letting anyone tell you no. So of course, numbers don't lie. To date, when we look at the global numbers of men and women who've been to space, only 12% of women have been astronauts. And so we have a little bit of leveling the playing fields that we have to do. And, that's been a little bit of my story as well. On my Aquanaut mission last year, when we spent 5 days underwater, I was one of a crew of 5. My crewmates were wonderful. They were amazing. They were all men. In my qualifying ground school for the Citizen Scientist Astronaut Candidate Program, I was the only female, but we've made tremendous evolution since then. I was not only part of the first crew to test a commercial spacesuit in zero gravity. In 2019, I was part of the first all-female crew to fly zero G for Project Possum. And so when we look at what the history has been versus what we want the trends to be, we have to look at, how do we level the playing field? How do we lift other women up with us? How do we bring them all along on this journey? And, from my experiences, I've learned that it's not just what we preach. It's not that we should just say, let's make this space more equitable for women, but it's what we tolerate. So if there's something that puts up barriers for women in STEM, in space, in medicine, then we should also be actively working to break down those barriers.
Yeah. Just one follow-up question on that. What has been the toughest barrier that you faced in getting to this point?
I think it's every step of the way. There's people who are going to tell you no, or you should focus on this, or I think a lot of us on this panel with our East Indian heritage can relate to the fact that traditionally we've been told that our place is to be a good wife or get married quickly, right? And when we realize that this, at the end of the day, the only opinion that matters is your own. You're the one who's living in your own head 24/7, right? And so you're the one who's going to have to live with your decisions and your judgments. And if you have a dream, and even if it's contrary to what other people are telling you, you should absolutely go for it. It doesn't matter if you're the first. Just make sure that you're not the last. So be the first woman, be the first woman pilot, be the first woman CEO in your field, but make sure you're not the last.
Yeah, that captures the spirit of many of the women on this panel. Let me bring in Sonal now. Sonal, from astronauts to pilots to shipping sort of HR mavens to crane operators, we now come to someone who's a master of wine. And I know when you reached out, you were telling me that you would not imagine that this is also a space where there's such few women. So talk a little bit about your journey.
So thank you, Barkha, for having me on your panel, and in the midst of such incredible women. It's such a privilege. I'll quickly explain what a Master of Wine is. So a Master of Wine is a global title and is widely regarded as the world's most respected title in the world of wines. Today, the total count of Masters of Wines across 30 countries worldwide is only 409. I became India's first and am, as of yet, India's only Master of Wine. And story has it that more people have been into space than are Masters of Wine in the world today. So I thought that would draw a nice correlation to our earlier speaker. I became a Master of Wine in 2016 at the age of 43. My journey began at the age of 33 when I took a career pivot from a more conventional career where I used to work in a Fortune 500 NASDAQ-listed company as a director of sales, and I was looking to reinvent myself into something. I considered a number of options, but what I became acutely aware of was the need for qualified wine professionals in the alcobev industry in India. India was at a very, very nascent stage at the point, and all I could see around me was a handful of self-proclaimed experts, mostly male, who drank expensive wines and who flaunted their knowledge. And I thought a time would come in our country when there would be need for solid, qualified, credible wine professionals who could make meaningful contributions to forward the cause and the culture of wine in India. So I decided to embark on this, and it was 10 long, arduous years of learning about wines and moving on from one step to another. And this was all done in London, because we had no access to world-class education at the time here in Mumbai or in India. So I had to relentlessly travel, stay away from home, stay away from husband, my child. But after 10 long, arduous years of studying and also professionally practicing wine as work, I managed to achieve this title in 2016. But it was
what's been the toughest part to break into this sort of this space where you spoke, of course, about the mansplainers, the experts who would tell you what to do. Other than the mansplaining, which I think we've all had to confront in different ways in all of our spaces, what was the toughest sort of stereotype that you had to contend with? And I'm a little reassured to hear that you did a career pivot in your 30s, because I was getting a little frightened by all these type A achievers who kind of knew in their teens what they wanted to do. But seriously, Sonal, beyond the mansplaining, what's been the toughest part?
So, at the time when I got into the alcobev segment in India, even the vision or the image of a woman holding a glass of wine or whiskey or anything like that was unthinkable. We see a lot of it in our Bollywood movies today, where we see female actors also now sporting a glass of wine. But at the time when I started, this imagery was unthinkable. It only was privileged sight for somebody playing a negative role, what we typically refer to as the vamps. Yeah. I remember calling up one senior person or so-called senior person in the industry to tell him that, look, I've decided to jump, deep dive into the world of wines, and I've decided to study about it. And I'm ultimately aiming for the top accolade in the world of wines, which is the Master of Wine. I think the first reaction I got from this supposedly senior person was one of being very dismissive. I think we tend to get that. And the dismissiveness comes from a total disbelief. In a way, they don't believe you can actually do it. And they think, okay, it's a 2-day thing. It's, it's a phase you're going through. And they kind of prod you along a little bit. And it's almost like, they're trying to humor you. They don't take you seriously. That's the first reaction. But over time, as one could see that I continued to make good progress, there were stories coming out talking about the fact that I'm well now into my journey of becoming India's first Master of Wine. I could well become one. Then I think the next one was the next reaction was to kind of exclude you, to not include you. So I remember trying to apply to this wine club, which was largely a gentleman's club. And I was eligible in every way to be part of that club because I wanted to try and add some value, be part of those events, share my knowledge. But I was denied an entry into that club. They did not give me, and they sort of created some sort of a cartel where I was denied membership into the club. So just going from dismissive to kind of sort of not including you is the second level of reaction. And then I think for the handful of you gentlemen who continue to remain insecure, there is a level of disdain that sets in where they sort of don't want to acknowledge you or give you the level of respect that you deserve. But I must say, I speak only of a few men. I think by and large, the whole industry has been so welcoming, so generous with their praise, so respectful in every way. And there's so much more to be done. So I continue to keep my eyes and focus on what can be done rather than the handful of few individuals, individuals who will keep pulling you back or keep denying you your rightful place in the sun.
Yeah, but you do make the fascinating point about the subliminal morality that was once associated with women who drink, leave alone master, the trade, so to speak. So really, you can see on your screen right now for our audience, just the diversity of professions that we have on a single screen. To me, it is just personally not just interesting, but it's also inspiring. It's also across the ages, it's across countries, it's across walks of life. And I think that's what really diversity in the genuine sense of the word is. Talking about diversity, I'll start with Shalini and then I'll come to Aarohi. Policies, one of the big debates that goes on is how to make workspaces more gender equal. I don't actually want to say women friendly because I think women are not looking for spaces to be friendly. I think women are looking for spaces to be equal. And I think some of this nomenclature that we've used over the years also needs re-examination. So Shalini, in your own journey, how have you also changed your mind? Like maybe 19 years ago when you set out on this journey, you had an expectation from a workspace and that expectation was limited. Women are sometimes hesitant to ask for more. We want our work to speak for itself. We don't like tom-tomming ourselves. We don't like using the word I. We have to learn to be brazen. So I'm just curious to know how you believe a place should be more gender equal, more inclusive, more diverse. I think those are the words we'd use today as opposed to women friendly.
Yeah, great question, Barkha. And if I can start with my own journey, right? When I started off, I was like, okay, now here are these 4 men leader idols that I have, and I need to be exactly like them. So then I kind of forgot who I was as a woman and tried to emulate all of these successful men, and what made them men are not what would make me successful. But I didn't realize that when I started it off, because the idea of success and what success meant was all of this, like, having an opinion, having a seat at the table, being aggressive and all of that stuff, right? And automatically it flowed into culture and expectation and performance appraisals, if you will. And people would sit in a room and say, you know what, that girl, she's intelligent, but she never puts up her hand when we in a room, or, and I'll give you a classic example. There's a giant boardroom, a big table, all of these chairs. And I think women sometimes walk into that boardroom and take a seat at the very end, and all the men take the seat in the center. And at some point, women then expect to be heard. But you walked in and took a seat at the end. So what is your role in making sure that you are being heard? So where I'm going with this is, I think it's, we have to meet in the middle. The policies, the ecosystem, male leaders, everybody meet in the middle to say, how can we make it more inclusive and more accepting of people being themselves when they come into work? Which means when I go into work, I'm a woman. I would want to continue to be a woman and act like a woman and not act like a man. And so what we're doing more increasingly in every environment in an organization is to say, to your point, how can we be equal? How can we say, hey, what is your opinion about something like this? Because we believe that as a business, we will be better if we look at diverse set of ideas. It could be male and women. It could be any other gender. It could be people with disability, but they all have opinions that as a business, if we can take into account, then our customers will actually accept us a lot more because we are catering to different environments.
Yeah, and I just want to say though that what it means to be a woman at a workplace could be very personally different. Like you could have one idea of it, I could have one idea of it, and
Yes.
Shauna could have a completely different idea. So we don't also want to broad brush that idea, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to have any entrenched notions, frankly, of masculinity and femininity.
Yes.
We've also come to
Yes.
understand that sexuality, gender, it's all fluid, it's
Yeah.
all self-defined, it's all deeply
Yes.
personal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, and what we talk about a lot is not about gender, but about what qualities do you bring to the table that makes you who you are today. And then make an organization around you be okay and accepting of that. And for that, we need everybody to say, hey, it's okay to be you. It's okay to be this. And here is what we need to be able to run a business and be successful. And we train, we teach, we talk about it, we are open about it. And I feel
yeah.
like many companies, including Maersk, does that.
Fantastic. Now, Aarohi, as sort of the youngest being on this table, and I'm not being ageist, I'm actually celebrating, the youth at which you have achieved everything that you have. What has been the toughest part of your journey getting here? And do you sometimes feel boxed in? Do you sometimes feel people make assumptions about you, about your life? And you literally have wings. You've literally been set free to fly. Has it been as easy as it sounds? I'm just curious to know what the obstacles, some of the hurdles have been on your way getting here.
So first of all, I completely agree with Dr. Shalini, whatever she said, because I feel misogyny is a real thing. It's not just about how a man feels about a woman, but also how a woman feels about herself and while what she feels about herself when she chooses a career. And that's when I feel a female role model plays a very important role. Um, I know like young girls come to me and they tell me, what you can fly an airplane. I'm like, and sometimes I'm shocked, like, it's a basic thing. People should know that a woman can fly an airplane. And, uh, and they always think it's a man's job. So, if a young girl, if a woman can't see it in a role model doing it, I don't think she would even imagine being it someday. And that's why I feel like women should be seen either as working as a pilot, or maybe repairing an airplane, working as a maintenance engineer, working as a technician, or even running a airline company as a CEO. But it's very important for women to get more and more exposure, because having a right role model at a right age plays
Who
a
was
very
yours? Who
important
was
role,
yours,
so that you
Aarohi?
get
Who
a
influenced
direction.
you?
Yes, so as growing up, I did not have any female pilot role model. Maybe that's the reason I completed my flying at 21. Probably I could have done it earlier. So I think it's very important for women to come out. Like, I didn't know that a woman can drive a crane. I had no idea. I had no idea a woman can be a wine master. So there's so many things women could do.
Yeah.
All we need is exposure and a little bit of kindness between us, because like we say, only a woman can support a woman,
Yeah.
and we all need to raise
So
each
I
other
always
up
say
together.
about both feminism and misogyny that they're gender neutral, right? We're all works in progress. We're all products of the same socialization. We're all products of the same bias. We're all fighting these battles every day. So it's actually not men versus women. It's misogyny versus equality. And that's, I think, it's patriarchy versus parity. And if we start framing the conversations like that, we'll understand ourselves also a little better and not make this a battle of the sexes in the cliched way that it has actually been presented. But Shauna, let me come to you and then to Lilita. In your world, really, it's a world that we literally don't understand yet. We're still only trying to understand space, the boundaries, what's possible, what's not possible. What has held you back, if something has? What have you had to shrug off? I sometimes say that women are entrapped in chains of gold. When people think they're being kind to us, they're actually imprisoning us. I say that to parents of daughters all the time, that if you're going to be overprotective, if you're going to be overzealous in the time that you expect your daughter to come home, which is different from the time you expect your son to come home, if you're giving different toys to your daughter than you are to your son, it all begins very early. And then there are all these ads that show these super women who are juggling work and home in this perfect, soft filtered way, which I always call chains of gold. And I know every woman smiles when I bring up this analogy because every woman can recognize this expectation of her, right? To be all things to all people. It's not possible. So I just want you to talk a little bit about how that struggle has been for you personally.
Yeah, that's a great question, Barkha. Thank you very much. And I'm laughing because I know that several of my co-panelists will appreciate and relate to this story, but sometimes it's better to just go ahead and do it despite what anyone says. And sometimes you have to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And so, you know, my parents and I have a great relationship. I love them very much and they love me very much. But like any parents, they'll worry about, you know, their daughter's safety and well-being. And so I never told them when I was learning to go get my private pilot's license. The only reason my mom found out was because I fell asleep in front of the manual, and then she saw the manual and said, "Oh, so you're learning to fly a plane now." You know, same thing with skydiving. I thought that it was better to go get the license first and then tell them I did it, because that way they can say, well, what if something goes wrong? And I can say, well, nothing did because I have the license, right? And so, it comes down to anticipating the hurdles that you're going to see, and trying to mitigate them. And that's what we do in space as a whole and in aviation. We identify risk, we mitigate it, and then we come up with a plan to circumvent it. And, maybe it's that way with breaking down barriers for women across all disciplines as well.
That's such a fascinating, and how do they respond now? I mean, now you want to go into space. It's gone beyond flying a plane.
We take it day by day. When we talk about going to space, my mom's excited. When we talk about, say what it takes to send a human to Mars, the 6 to 9 month journey one way, the years long profile, the hazards of spaceflight, I think she needs a little bit of convincing still.
Yeah. Lilita, how did your family respond? How did your family respond, when you started controlling your beautiful monster, as you call it? What was the response from family?
Well, the response from my family, I have 2 kids. I have a daughter of 15 years now, and my son of 10 years. They are so amazed, and they're so happy for me to be different. My mommy is different. They always say my mommy is my hero. My mommy can do anything. So they feel they are superheroes too. And anytime I have a challenge, growing up as a child, my mom always used to tell me, anything you want to do, just try. If you don't try, they'll say you cannot. So that's what I do. As a daily basis, I try to do anything that comes. Any challenge that I'm facing, I try to do it first to overcome. Everything you do, you have to have a aim. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't do anything. It's about believing. It's a dream. Everybody would say, but is a woman can do this? No. If you believe you can do anything. I believe you have to believe in anything that you start. It's step by step. And once you believe you do something, you can do it. And
it's just so great to hear. Sorry. Complete your point. Yeah.
The interaction with the people. The interaction with the people when I'm around my family, they are so happy and excited to tell people. My cousin drives and crane. She moves the world. She brings all the medicine in. She works at the company, brings in all the medical instruments. Anything that you're using at home next year will be my cousin bringing it in. They are so happy for me, and it changed my life 100%.
Lovely. It is lovely. And I think the most touching part of that was your kids saying, my mom's a hero. And I think more kids say that about their mothers. I think that's just absolutely fantastic. Sonal, you've spoken about the stereotyping of women in the alcohol beverage space. But, across professions, what women battle with is often similar. They battle with patronizing colleagues who think they're being nice, but actually are being completely condescending. They battle with manners. So we're doing the sort of the opposite of it here, like spaces that are just where all the speakers are men. They battle with battles at home that men don't have to fight. So I always say equality at home is almost as important as equality at work, and there will be no equality at work till there's equality at home. Speak to that in your own life.
So when I made the decision to get into the field of wines, and by the way, it was my husband who spurred me to do this. I'm married to a Britishman, so thankfully I just completely override the typical Indian male stereotype mentality of whether or not to get into this field. So I managed to circumvent that. But he was hugely supportive. When I mentioned this to my parents, who, by the way, I come from a tradition-bound, but I'd like to believe a very progressive Maharashtrian family. But as a profession, they didn't really understand it. My mother had a few doubts, but she had more conventional choices for me. But my father has always taught me to, he only taught me one lesson, which is to say, do what you want to in life, Sonal. Just make sure that you excel at it and you are respected for what you do. So I sort of always held that lesson very close to my heart. So my father was without understanding exactly what I was heading into, was supportive of it. But my daughter was 1 year old when I was accepted on the Master of Wine program. And all that time traveling to London, staying away from home, it really weighed heavily on my guilt. And believe me, the mother's guilt is so real. There were so many moments of thinking, why am I doing this? No one's putting a gun to my head. Why am I going down this path? Why am I so obsessed? Because it did become an obsession at some point to become India's first Master of Wine. And the woman bit wasn't planned for. I just wanted to be India's first Master of Wine. It's just incidental that I get called upon a lot now to speak as a woman, incidentally, also to have got into this space. But the mother's guilt was so overbearing at the time that there were many moments when I thought, should I actually stop doing this? Because the journey, of course, was also dotted with a lot of failures. It wasn't just a linear road to success. There was a lot of pullbacks and failures and moments of feeling down. But my husband kept prodding me along. He kept saying, no, stop making excuses. You made this commitment and you're going to go at it. And I must hand over that acknowledgement. I must acknowledge his role in this. But there was an inner belief, because I didn't come from a family of alcobevs. I had no prior knowledge of this industry. You really, at that time, you really got to have that enormous level of grit and self-belief that makes you believe that, yes, I can do this, and this is a space that I'm destined for, and I must reach there. And it's this unwavering faith that no matter what happens, no matter what the adversities, I will prevail. That kind of keeps you going. And my greatest compliment came to me on the day I became a Master of Wine, when I remember it was Ganesh Chaturthi day, and I was doing the puja because, we keep Ganpati at home. And I got a call from the institute to say, you're now India's first Master of Wine. And there was, everyone was around me, my husband, my parents, but everybody who actually supported me through that journey was with me. And my daughter, who was by then 7 years old, and who was learning a bit of mathematics at school, comes to me and she says, Mommy, are you really India's only Master of Wine? Because that makes you 1 in a billion. And I thought, wow, that's a great hashtag. I'm going to use that.
It's a great story, but I do want to say, shed that guilt. Because one of the things that I always say to women is that we're far too apologetic. We're far too guilty for no reason. And it's very provocative, but I always tell women we should learn to be more selfish. And there's always a start in the room when I use that word, because it typically has negative connotations. But for women to say I before we is so important, because if you're not happy as an individual, there's no way you can or provide happiness to anybody around you in whatever structure those people are in your life. Now, we have about 5 minutes left. And what I really want to hear in these closing comments is one lesson of life that you'd like to pass on to other women, especially to younger girls who are listening to this, as well as young men who want to be sensitive, who want to say and do the right thing, but may not have be equipped with necessarily the language or the full understanding of what is required, right? So I'll start with you, Lilita. The one little tip that you'd like to give to other young girls who are looking at you, who are watching this program, something you've learned that you want to share. Just unmute yourself. You're on mute. Lilita, you're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
I'm it already.
Yeah. Yeah.
For all those girls out there, don't think that because you're a girl, you don't have opportunities. The opportunities are there. You only have to believe, and anything you choose to be, just be the best one. And
I like that.
the sky's the
I like that.
limit.
Anything you choose to
Sky's
be the
the
best at
limit.
it. Yeah. I
The
like that.
sky's the limit. Anything you see you like, don't feel weird. Being weird is being nice. It's something different. That's all I can say to those girls.
Lovely. Aarohi, you must be sort of meeting young kids all the time who are like looking at you in absolute fascination, right? What would you say to kids your age when you were 8 and you were looking for that female role model in your space and you couldn't find one? What would you say to that 8-year-old? What would you say to your 8-year-old self today?
So, as I've been flying for 6 years, there's one thing I've learned, that no matter how good you are at your job, people are always going to judge you. There's always going to be memes about female pilots and how females are weak and all the rubbish talks. But the most important thing is, if you're well trained, if you're well qualified, and you're good, I think the joke's on them, because you are the best and you are going to succeed. So I just have one line for the little kids, like, if you can dream it, you can do it. So just go for it. Don't think twice. Just have a lot of good thoughts, a lot of love from your parents, and just go for it.
What's your next plan, Aarohi? What's your next big plan? I mean, you've already crossed the Atlantic solo. What are you planning to do next?
Yes, so I completed the expedition was completed 80%. I crossed the Atlantic, Pacific Ocean, and the Greenland ice cap. And now I'm planning to work in commercial airlines. Hopefully by next year I will be one of the airline pilots.
Super. Sonal, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
I would say, to myself, it's all going to happen. It's all going to pan out eventually, because like you mentioned earlier, Barkha, till the age of 25, I was just really having such a great time in life. I didn't have any proper plans for what I was ultimately going to be doing with my life. But I want to reach out to a lot of other women and say, don't think, just act, because a lot of us tend to think, I'm going to make this idea happen. I'm going to work on this idea once I'm married, or once I've had my kids, or once they're a certain age, or once we constantly have these sort of milestones that we want to achieve first. And we constantly tend to put our own careers and our own aspirations and dreams on a back burner. Don't do that, because it's so important to act upon our ideas, because the idea belongs to the one, not to the one who first thinks it, but to the one who acts upon it. And it's so important to be first when you're trying to chase a unique, great idea. So I would encourage all the women out there to chase their aspirations fearlessly and unabashedly, and garner all the support you can from around you shamelessly, and steer forward towards your goals.
Yeah, and I just want to add a thought here that I was thinking of, Shauna, as I was listening to all of you. I remember interviewing Hillary Clinton once, and she said to me that she'd learned in public life, and it doesn't even have to be public, but particularly if you're successful and people know you and people know about you, that you'll have to develop a skin as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros. And I think her point was that there will be things said about you, to you, behind your back all the time, and you're just going to have to water off duck's back. So that would be my little sort of thing to young girls, that it doesn't matter how other people define you. That's very important for women to internalize. But go ahead with your mantra for life, Shauna.
Yeah, absolutely. So to the girls out there, act like you belong here, because you absolutely do. To the men out there, be an ally. Don't just let things happen. Look for reasons to help break down barriers, because there's data showing teams perform better as mixed gender crews and teams. And then to everyone out there who makes it to their dream, pay it forward, because none of us, I certainly wouldn't be where I am if people hadn't invested in me when I was starting out. And so whether, you're at the beginning of your career, whether you've made it, someone's looking up to you, someone's admiring you, and it's because someone took the time to invest in you. So don't forget to pay it forward.
Yeah. Shalini, I'll let you have the last one.
Great. So there's the saying that treat others like you want to be treated. I actually have a different take on that. Treat others like they want to be treated, because nobody is the same, right? I could treat them like I want to be treated, and they're completely different. And this is actually a message to all leaders, but mostly men leaders, that they assume that they know when a woman has just had a baby, or they've been, at home for a year, and then they're saying, oh, let's give her shorter hours or something. And they assume they know what this woman wants. So my advice is always ask other people what they need and how they want to be treated, and then cater to that. And it's the same with women. I ask myself, what do I really, every morning I stand in front of the mirror and then say, what do you want to do today, Shalini? And then I figure out what I want to do. And so my advice is for all the male leaders, just ask the women how they want to be treated and what they need, and ask yourself how you want to deal with that situation after you get the response.
Thank you. It's been so lovely. I could talk to you, to all of you for hours, but there is a finite time, unfortunately. But I just really, I look at the screen and like my heart fills with just absolute joy, because really, literally, even a decade earlier, just even 10 years ago, I don't think we would have had the sort of diverse representation of all of you that we see on your screen. And so, sometimes when you feel like nothing is changing, you look at every decade and how things have actually shifted. What is possible today that wasn't possible 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That was so much the exception rather than the norm, that is getting normalized today, and may reach a point where it becomes more and more normal. May more of you shine, break down walls, break down barriers, and dream your dream. Thank you so much. It's been lovely having all of you at We the Women in this special series, The Female Voice, with change makers from across the globe.